While she's unmuting, I will do the Writer Center spiel. My name is Zach Powers. I'm an author. I've written 2 books, but I am also the Director of Communications at the Writer Center. The Writer Center, for those who don't know us, is a literary arts nonprofit headquartered in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. We host literary events. We also host 300 writing workshops every year in all subjects in all genres for every level of experience, and ranging from $25 pop-up workshops to longer 8-week workshops to even a couple year-long programs that we offer just constantly throughout the year. So if you have not done that before, please go to writer.org. I'm sort of glancing at Amy or Emily to toss that into the chat window to pull that up. That said, as a nonprofit, we do occasionally have to, do things to make money. And it's my job this event is free, but if you liked it, it could be not free. And you could donate money on our website, which is writer.org, but we also accept Venmo at writers-center or PayPal at info@writer.org. Please note the really cool metallic stars I drew on my sign. I'll bring that up later for those of you who want a second look, because it's really, really good. And lastly, I'm done. Please go to our website and check out all the things we offer. We have, I think, on the calendar already another 5 free events like this, so please check out those, and there's going to be a couple more going up any day now. So keep an eye on us. Join our mailing list. If you're here, surprise, you're already on it. That's how we get you. So let's get started. We are joined today by novelist Chelsea Bieker out of Portland, Oregon. She is the author of visual prop Godshot, which is one of my favorite novels this year, one of my favorite novels of the last several years, one of my favorite novels. I'm going to stop qualifying it and just say it. I love this novel so much. So when I reached out to Chelsea and she said she would be happy to do this, I was super thrilled. It's nice I have so many questions I want to ask. So while I'm letting all of you ask questions, I'm getting through mine first because I'm the host and I can. So Chelsea, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Zach, for reading my book and asking me to be here.
Absolutely. So do you have a brief reading you could do just for anyone who hasn't read the book yet to get a taste of what we'll be talking about?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
I'll just start right with the beginning and kind of that opening first scene. To have an assignment, Pastor Vern said, you had to be a woman of blood. You had to be a man of deep voice and Adam's apple, and you should never reveal your assignment to another soul, for assignments were a holy bargaining between you and your pastor and God himself. To speak of them directly would be to mar God's voice, turn the supernatural human, and ruin it. So not even my own mother could tell me what her assignment was that unseasonably warm winter, wouldn't tell me months into it when spring lifted up more dry heat around us and everything twisted and changed forever. I longed to know where she went when she left our apartment each morning, returning in the evening flushed, a bit more peeled back each time. I imagined her proselytizing to the vagrants sleeping on rags in the fields at the edge of town, combing the women's mud-baked hair, holding their hands and exorcising evil from their hearts. I imagined her floating above our beloved town of peaches, dropping God glitter over us like an angel, summoning the rain to cure our droughted fields. I imagined all these things with a burn of jealousy, for I had not received my woman's blessing yet, the rush of blood between my legs that would signify me as useful. I just turned 14, but was still a board-chested child in the eyes of God and Pastor Vern, and so I prayed day and night for the blood to come to me in a river, to flood the bed I shared with my mother. Then I would be ready. I could have an assignment too. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. So could you just tell us what the novel is in your own words? Just like the elevator pitch of the novel for again, those who may not be familiar with it yet.
Yeah, you'd think by now that I would really have that down, but for some reason it feels hard every time. So the book takes place in this droughted agricultural Central Valley. It's a fictional landscape, but it's also really rooted in a real place, which is the Central Valley of California. Peaches is experiencing an extreme drought, and it's this tiny town that's run by a cult leader. And so essentially the novel is one girl's journey through, after her mother leaves, to deal with this cult uprising, her place in it, her own faith, what she believes, and then ultimately to find her mother again in whatever form that takes.
So maybe the most striking thing for me, I consider myself a writer who writes mostly in scene. Like I really feel I have trouble. I'm not good at summary. I'm not good at exposition. I need a scene to frame all that. And I feel like your novel even one-ups me in terms of just such beautiful focus on scene. And often in real time, you're just progressing along almost as if in that cinematic quality of moving scene to scene, happening in real time. Is that something that you have intentionally developed? Is that something you did specifically for this novel? Is that innate to your writing style?
I think it is innate to my writing style in the sense that as I'm writing, I often find that scene is the best way I can see the characters actually reveal truth. Where if I'm in the confines of a first person narration, I can tell, but at a point I need that telling to be in contrast with the world of the story. So the easiest way for me to do that is generally putting that first person character in conversation in a moment with another character. I think mainly just because the first person voice has no control over that other character, right? So that way they're now contending with the actual world, and my narrator can't control what the grandmother will say or what the mother will say. And I find that to be a little bit more dynamic in terms of creating propulsion and momentum, and then also some kind of narrative truth where I really want to put my narrator in some hot water to see what they'll do. And often I'm surprised by what they will do. And for me, that is how I just form story and how plot unfolds. So I don't know. I think it's innate, but it's also my way of uncovering what actually is going to happen in the story.
Were there any off the top of your head, any influences to that style? I'm trying to think of some myself, but I just wonder if you know any writers off the top of your head who you like and you think probably have that same thing going.
I think a lot about Angels by Dennis Johnson. I don't know if you've read that novel. It feels really scenic to me, and there's a lot of dialogue and that same sort of movement is happening. Dennis Johnson in general, I think, does that a lot, where the characters, yeah, totally.
I'll just hold up my ever-present reference.
Yeah.
Jesus' Son.
I think of him for sure. There's so many that just came to mind first, but I remember probably over 10 years ago in one of my first writing workshops I ever was in, I wrote a story about this child with their alcoholic mother, and it kind of takes place in this apartment setting, and the mother is basically passed out the whole story. So she's not engaging very much, and the child is moving through the rooms and moving through life. And to me, it was this really true experience because, right, doesn't an alcoholic sleep all day sometimes? To me, that was so true. And I remember my professor at that time said, you need to wake the mom up. And you need to see what she's going to say, because she's going to say something. And we need, as readers, to know what that is. And we need to know how your character is going to react to whatever she does. And my first impulse was, yeah, but it's fine if she sleeps, right? I mean, that's what she does. But I think when you're writing fiction, you have to really double check that. You have to really ask yourself, is it fine if my character is asleep the whole time? Or do I need to wake them up? And I think it's more of a metaphor in terms of writing scenes where I want each scene to be woken up. I want each character to be holding their own on the page so that dynamic energy remains.
How do you weave in things then like exposition, summary, and backstory into a very scenic cinematic style? Because you do that brilliantly. It's not like there aren't those elements in the novel, but they're always woven in just a very delicate way.
Thank you. I think for me, I think about how backstory is informed by the present moment. So often, even in life, we might be driving, we see something and we're catapulted back into memory, but it's not just coming out of nowhere. I saw something that triggered that. So in a scene when I'm writing, I want the backstory to be connected to something that's happening. So the character is maybe having this conversation in real time, but now they're thinking about this other thing, this other memory that relates somehow to that present moment. So I think when the present moment is informing the backstory, it just feels organic and it feels natural, versus if I just need to get some context in and I just throw it in there, right? Which I do, but it's more of a revision thing. It's finding the ways to pull those organic strings to find, well, where would this narrator really be thinking about this? Maybe after she talks to this person or walks by this house, and just conjoining those together for me is what I try to do.
Just a real quick note to all our attendees here that if you have questions along the way and you pull up the chat window, please write your questions in the chat window and we will get to them throughout the course of our chat. So let's talk about peaches, because you mentioned that you mentioned peaches a little bit in your introduction, but where did this setting come from? How much was something from personal experience? How much was research? How much was imagination?
I grew up in the Central Valley. I lived in Fresno, which is the biggest city in that area, the most densely populated, but it's a huge agricultural epicenter for the world's food. And so there's tons of farming communities outside of the city and within, and all these really small, towns that surround around vineyards or different farming landscapes. And growing up, my grandfather had he had sold it by that time, but a raisin farm out in this really remote, tiny little town that's probably not really even on the map. If it is, it's barely stated. But I was always intrigued by this small place and sort of the eeriness of the landscape and how isolated it seemed in comparison to the fact that really we had only driven 30 minutes away, and it seemed so remote and so pulled away from the rest of the world. And it just stuck with me. And I think when I created Peaches, I was really visualizing that. I wanted it to be close to Fresno, but apart enough to where I could make my own rules for how the town would operate. And that was mainly why I changed the name and made it fictional too, because I didn't want to have to adhere to all of the rules of a place, but I wanted some of the structure of a known place like the Central Valley at the same time.
So on a smaller scale too, to me, I noted, and I read the book a while ago, so if I forgot one, I'm sorry, but you have Cherry's house, you have the church and the church facilities, and then you have the diviner's house, which is a sex line call center house nearby. So just for those who haven't read, these settings are so absolutely distinct though. And how did you deliberately create those settings to play against each other? Or were you more focused just on each individual setting and giving it its own life?
I think both in a way. I think particularly with the Red House, the diviner house that you mentioned, that is the phone sex business, I needed something in the town because the town is so claustrophobic and so small. I needed something that would offer a portal into another world for my main character. She wasn't really going to get any insight to the outside world from home or from the church. And so I think impulsively I needed a space where she would go and meet people she wasn't likely to meet in that town, yet they were sort of on the outskirts of the town. So I still wanted it confined, but I wanted it to be really different. And yeah, I think that house and then the church where the cult is kind of centered really do play off of each other. They're so opposite. And I was thinking about Cherry's house. That was sort of one of the first images I had before I even started writing. It sort of just came to me and I saw this woman living in this house that hadn't been well maintained for many years, but she sort of had created her own world of her own hobbies and desires and the dust and all of the kind of rot within. That felt really striking to me, and I think some of the story bloomed out of that place, actually.
I'm still uncomfortable with that setting, like months later. Like it still sits with me badly. So congratulations, effective setting.
You're welcome.
So we have a few questions already in the chat window. So the first one is, does plot unfold? Oops, it's another one popped up and hid my first one. Does plot unfold from character organically for you, or do you outline, or some combination perhaps of both?
I think I would say in the first half of writing, so this book was kind of a 6-year-long process for me. And I think the first half of that seemed more rooted in sort of a fly by the seat of my pants foray and really letting the plot unfold through character and sort of not really doing much planning. That said, I think I hit a point where I realized I did need to create a little bit more structure through some outlining, through some storyboarding for myself around midway through. So I could begin to see it from a bird's eye view, because that was really hard. When you're writing such a long form, it's really hard to get that perspective of how it's moving and how the pacing is working and how, where your plot points are hitting. Those weren't really things I was thinking about as I was first writing it, but definitely things I thought about in the revision. Who's to say I could have saved some time had I outlined it? I don't know. It's hard to know if I would have arrived at the same story. I definitely had some major things I sensed would happen, and I definitely had sort of a final image in mind earlier on, but certainly things shifted, and yeah, I think it was a bit of both.
I'm trying a weird new technique. So I have a new project I'm working on. I'm in a later draft. I've started doing intense research on the subject again, like way more research than I did before I started writing. And it's a very strange experience to have the material in front of me and thinking about instead of the abstract idea of thinking about the ideas of the research and how they might come together, how these new ideas I'm getting will apply to material that already exists on the page. So I think that's sort of the similar, like, I winged it pretty much in writing it, even though some research, but now that I'm getting very deliberate in the return to it on this revision process. So I think that's interesting too. A quick one maybe. Someone is always interested in, April is always interested in hearing about any craft books that authors use. Do you have any favorite craft books?
Yeah, we were talking about the Tin House Writers Workshop when we started the conversation. And actually, I don't know if anyone's read the Tin House Writers Notebooks. They're basically collections of essays from writers, I believe, that have come to the workshop and given seminar craft talks. And they're all gathered in these sort of anthologies. And I always found those to be so helpful. There's an essay on place by Dorothy Allison, character motivation by Amy Bender. It's just this really rich resource. And I love it because they're writers that I admire, but they're going really deep into their own process and on a specific topic. So I've learned a lot from those, and I love how they offer really specific examples and textual evidence. And within that book, I think there's 2 volumes that are available. Those definitely come to mind first. I don't know. What about you, Zach?
I flipped around. I have that one of them sitting right behind me, but it was not immediately locatable on the shelf, so I could not show it off. But I have Benjamin Percy, who I workshop with at the Tin House Workshop. He has a book. So I don't think Ben Percy necessarily really likes my writing that much. And he's a very plot-centric author, and I'm coming from a very non-plot-centric place in my own writing. But his book is, partly because it is so different than my thinking on writing, he has this book called Thrill Me, and it's his just collection of essays he's written on craft over the years. And he is a deep thinker about plot and suspense and action. And that was it's really helpful to, even though it may not be the thing I'm going to dive into and follow word for word, his advice, that one made me think about writing really deeply. And he's a brilliant, brilliant thinker on it and a good guy. So I was glad to have that one. The Tin House books. I I'd have to pull them off the shelf to keep thinking of them after that. But is it Grey Wolf that has the Art of series? Yeah, Grey Wolf is a great indie press, and they have a whole series of fairly small sized books by a bunch of different authors, and it's called The Art of Something. And like the art of, some of them are poetry, but even the poetry ones as a fiction writer have been very helpful. And that one's nice because it's deep dives by a single author into a single subject. So longer than an individual essay, but not like a full textbook size of writing. All right. So from Diana, your voice is so strong and captivating. Did you have to work at this? How would you advise us to bring out our own true writing voices?
Yeah, I feel like voice to me is really everything. It's the first thing I hear, and it's really what drives any story I'm writing. And often I think it will come from a turn of phrase or just a strange way someone says something or something that comes to me. But it seems to be a cadence and a way that cracks itself open to reveal a character. The language does itself. I think I hear a lot of it almost audibly, like just my ear seems attuned to that specific way of thinking and listening to people when they're talking. And I've kind of always been like that. I don't know, in childhood, I just had a family that said some bizarre things and had funny ways of pronouncing things and just almost a language of its own. And I think that stayed with me in just the way that I was able to hear and then transcribe almost to the page. As for developing your own voice, I don't know. I think it's kind of related to character. It's related to whatever your strength is, whatever your innate strength is in what comes to you first. I feel like leaning into that and allowing yourself to really meditate and hear that character speak to you. I have a friend who journals in the voice of her characters, just free form, consistently as she's writing a project. And I've done a little bit of that, and I liked doing it a lot. So trying some of that out, I think when the stakes are lower, like if you're just free writing, you're journaling, sometimes the voice can arrive in a surprising way versus when we're writing the story, which can come with a little pressure to get it right the first time, even though we all know it's not going to be right the first time. I still think writing freehand in that journal form can be a little bit freeing and can unlock some voice stuff.
That leads back to one of my lines of questioning real quickly, which was about the narrator, Lacey, who is a fabulous narrator. So we talked broadly about developing voice. How did Lacey's voice develop through writing and through revision? Was this a voice that you had from day, was she the narrator from day one? Was this always through her voice, or was that something that you discovered along the way? And then once you had chosen this voice, was her voice intact from day one of writing from her perspective, or did it evolve as you wrote and then as you revised?
Yeah, so originally I wrote a very fast draft of this book, although now I would even say it doesn't seem anything like this book. It's like a totally separate thing, but it was the first shot at this story. And I wrote it from the mom's perspective as an older woman looking back at this time. And also, as soon as I finished it, I just knew intuitively that I would have to start over with the daughter telling it more in a more immediate space. I felt like the story had just lost some power. It had just lost something. It wasn't ringing correctly to me, having the mother tell it. And so I started over. I started with the daughter, and I think actually remembering those early attempts, I think her voice was even a little bit more snappy, maybe a little cockier, maybe a little bit more rough around the edges. And as I went deeper with each draft and over the years, it's possible that I felt her more. I felt the heart of her more clearly. And I think some of those edges softened a little bit, like maybe in a good way. Also, to carry out a story this long, some of that I don't know, some of that choppiness and attitude had to give way to something deeper eventually, for me. So I think some of those early drafts would read slightly differently, for better or for worse.
So one of the things that strikes me about the narrator and the voice is that whenever you have a young narrator, there's limited understanding, and especially within the concept of this novel, that the things going on are beyond what a 14-year-old is really comprehending. How did you manage that balance? Because it is like, this is a narrator who can go from wisdom to utter naiveness within a snap, and that's such a delicate, and doesn't feel forced or strange. That's who she is, and it feels very authentic. How did you is that just through the revision process too that you reach that?
Yeah, I think too, I thought a lot about, not only is she just a 14-year-old girl, she's a 14-year-old girl that's been raised in this really isolated cult-like environment. So she's even more been trained even more to be a little narrow-minded. And the whole book is an unpeeling of that. So yeah, there is this undulation of her steadfast belief coming up again and again against things that are telling her she's maybe not knowing the full truth, or maybe there is another truth. And it seems like it has to slowly evolve into a different belief system or different understanding. That can't just happen in a snap. And so, yeah, writing her perspective in a way that honored that process that I think we all go through anyway through adolescence, where there's a shedding of belief of whatever you've been raised with as you come into adulthood. What kind of adult do you want to be? There's that tension between who you were and who you might become, and there's choices to be made. And I think she's brought to that threshold a little earlier than most, just through her circumstances, and especially the loss of her mother character in the story. But I still did want to maintain the fact that she's 14. She's still a child, in so many ways, and finding those little moments, I think, again, in dialogue, often with some of the questions she might ask, or the ways she relates to her peers, were ways to maintain the fact that, yes, she's still really young.
So, question from Shannon. You may have hit on this a little bit, but let's ask it explicitly, which is, how long did it take you from start to finish to write Godshot? I guess from the idea concept through the published draft, I guess.
Yeah, it was about 6 years, I think, to the final ending edits. 6, closer to 7.
Nice. All right. From Ellen, I'm a journalist and I've always loved getting interesting quotes from people for dialogue. How do you invent dialogue for different characters? Do you spend a lot of time listening to how people speak? Do you take notes when you hear interesting snippets?
Well, I don't know if this will apply to anyone else, but my mom is famous for saying the thing that should not be said out loud, to put that kindly. And I think we all probably know someone like that, but she says things to me over the phone now sometimes that could not be said by anyone else. I feel like they're so striking and often so bizarre, and so earnest. So I will write down things she says. She's really the only person in my life that I hear speak and I'm like, I have to write that down. But yeah, I think it is just tuning your ear to listening to the bizarreness. I remember some of the things in this book. I watched some televangelists. I watched some things like that on YouTube, and finding those lines that seemed really bizarre to me in those videos was helpful. You never know where that stuff's going to come from. And so I think as writers anyway, we're curious, and there is like, our perception is open to that. But yeah, a lot of that dialogue was kind of born out of just being shocked and appalled by my own mother. Thanks, Mom.
Is she on the call right now? Or on the Zoom right now? Can we?
No, she's not. But she would probably be proud of what I said about her, I think.
mean, I think just on my end too, I think I'm always listening. Is one of the interesting parts of dialogue is when people don't mean what they say. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime you hear someone saying something that is obviously contrary to the thing they're actually thinking, that's dialogue to me. Like just normal basic chit chat, whatever. But when someone is undermining their own position with what they're saying, that's the fascinating moment for me. So
Yeah, and I love the idea of layering too, and I'm sure everyone's heard this advice, but having characters saying things that are incongruent with what they're saying to each other. They're both just talking, but it's not like a yes or no response. It's organic. It's sort of this strange back and forth that's more about them as individuals than it is about the conversation, which I think that is how people have conversations a lot of the time.
also part of fiction for me as opposed like sometimes dialogue in fiction is not a representation of realistic dialogue, that we don't want to hear completely realistic dialogue in a piece of fiction. And if you read it, you would probably go like, this is, oh, I mean, I've at least 50 times in this conversation. So we don't want to get that in our, but even on a broader level, I think just you can force the language of speech in a way that makes it something else. And that's, I mean, that's fascinating to me at least.
Absolutely.
From Fred, I'm reading Godshot now and I'm enthralled. I'm curious if you do anything in particular to get in touch with your characters when writing, if you ever have to separate yourself from them. So.
Yeah, I think the main thing I do to get in touch with them would have to, it seems to be rooted a little bit in thinking about them. Maybe that sounds too simplistic, but I think a lot of times I will write, there'll be an outpouring of words on the page, but then I might take a walk later wherein I'm thinking deeply of those characters and something comes up and it feels like that lightning bolt moment where I'm like, oh, okay, I have a deeper understanding suddenly, or now I know what they're really after. I know now what their real desire might be. So I think always just having part of yourself attuned to that and not limiting the spaces in which that can happen to just at the page, because I think our brain is always working. So just allowing yourself to have moments where maybe there's just nothing that you're doing but thinking of them and seeing what comes. And that's hard to do this day and age when we have phones and podcasts. To just take a walk and not engage with anything else is actually seems kind of hard sometimes, but to do it offers real gifts. And I like to do that. It seems more of a meditative connection to characters.
So all writers should install an isolation chamber in their homes to
Yeah.
break away from. Next question is, where do your character names come from? So they're very clever with Cherry, Trinity, Prism, Danae. Is Danae the proper pronunciation of that one too? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some of the names I lift from my family. Again, I guess I should thank them more. Yeah, I have kind of a branch of my family with the last name of Hurd, and that always just stuck with me, and I like to use it, and I liked the sound of it in place with all the other first names. I think a lot about names. I've gone on baby registry or like baby name sites. I'll repurpose names or change them just a little bit. But sometimes I actually use names that are from familiar people or who maybe had been the inspiration for a character at the beginning. And then at the end, I'm like, I can't actually use this real person's name. I need to change it. And that can be hard and jarring a little bit, but then it's fun because it can be a more conscious choice.
I actually just had to ask a friend if I could just use their name, because by the time I'd written this, I like, no, it has to be this name now. I got permission, but I was like, there's nothing bad. It's a secondary character, not one of the main characters. So I think it was flattering rather than weird, but.
Yeah.
So from Joseph, writers always talk about showing up and making time to write when asked about process, and it can be vague. So he's curious, what's your process? What do you actually do when you sit down at the desk to write? Is it, make sure to do at least X pages or words a day? Do you write free form and revise much later? So what is that specific process rather than just sitting there, even if it's not every day?
Yeah. So my schedule is a little bit formed by outside forces, just as probably all of ours is with jobs and families. But I have two young children who, especially in quarantine now, are with me all the time. And so my life is really their schedule, and I write during nap times or bedtimes. So I know for myself it'll be around lunchtime that I might get a shot at it, or I'll have a longer chance after 7 p.m. So I already know that. But then part of that is the anxiety of not knowing how long I really will have. When will the nap be over? I don't really always know. So there's not a lot of dawdling around. As soon as I sit down, I just start. I've really let go over the years of any ideas of perfection when I sit down. I just need to feel the physicality of getting the words down. I know that I can always delete and edit later. So it's sort of just breaking through that initial whatever might be blocking you or whatever fear you have around writing, because we all have different things. But I think just lowering the stakes and being like, this is the only time I have, so I'm just going to start with whatever it is. And I actually just have been working on a new novel right now over the past couple months, and I started doing a practice that I've never done before, but I committed to 1,000 words a day. And I don't know why I've never done something like that before. I just haven't. But I did this time just as an experiment to see, could I actually do it? What would that feel like? And I loved it. I don't know. I would challenge everyone to just try it. It seems like it reminded me that I can write through discomfort. And I think all of us can, but we forget that sometimes. Like, we think we have to be a certain feeling, or we have to have a certain amount of energy. And what I found was actually I could be really tired, or I could have a headache, and I could still somehow get it done. And that was an interesting process. And I also didn't read anything that I wrote the day before. I only had forward motion. Usually I will go back to what I wrote before and fiddle with that for a long time, and then maybe write a new paragraph. But this was only forward motion. And I think too, I would say that was really useful in writing this first draft. I don't know if that's always useful, but if you're trying to just get something out, and for me, there's so much comfort in having words on the page, because then I can do whatever I want. But I first need those words on the page, whatever they are and however bad they are. So it was a good technique in just getting that first draft kind of out. And I should say, I got the idea from Jamie Attenberg, who every year on Twitter hosts the hashtag 1,000 words of summer, which I think goes on for 2 weeks, but I just kind of kept doing it. And yeah, I don't know if anyone else has done that, or what your feeling about it was, but I felt like that amount of words, something about it was just enough to feel accomplished. And sometimes it would lead to many more words than that, but I knew at least I would get to that point.
I know Joe appreciates the kids comment, because he has 3 little kids at home. So practical advice there for you too, Joe. So from Shannon again, who was the first character that came forward before you sat down to write, and why?
I think it was Lacey May. I think it was always her for me, even though my first stab at it was writing it from the mother's perspective. The heart of the story was always going to be Lacey's experience with her mother leaving. So I knew that somehow the novel would be circling that main theme. I didn't exactly know all of the ABCs of it, but having that idea of the heart of the story was always kind of there.
So I had a few questions I wanted to ask from my list again, and it was sort of writing about faith. So a lot of this novel takes place within a cult, but to the people within the cult, they're within a faith system. Inside a cult, you don't say the word cult. You think you're within a normal faith system. So how do you balance writing critically about faith, which does occur? Your narrator is not uncritical, but while remaining sympathetic to the faithful, because at the same time she is also remains faithful, even while she has some thoughts and criticisms on it.
Yeah, I think faith is so complicated and it's never simple. And I wanted the book to explore that and also to not view it as this black and white thing where you're either a believer or you're not a believer of anything. I think especially for someone who grows up entrenched in religion, a complete turning away from that is really complicated. It's not really a shift that just happens in an instant, and it's not without reverberations into the future. So I wanted to look at that. And I don't think Lacey ever fully does turn away from faith as a broader idea, but she turns away from that specific cult in her own way. But yeah, I don't know. For me, I understand the need to belong. I understand that as humans, we all have that inside of us. We want to be on the right side of things. We want to feel like we have purpose in life. These are just kind of basic fundamental desires that I think almost anyone can relate to. And so what cults do is that, they are tapping into that on every level. And I wanted to show the human side of that desire, that their desire to be a part of this thing isn't really inherently bad. They're also impoverished and they have very limited resources and no education really. And, so they're grasping at whatever they can, and in their own way, they are trying to learn, however misguided it becomes. But there's so many complications of why someone would go along with a cult or enter into a faith system that maybe from the outside seems crazy or seems unimaginable. I think it all goes back to those root desires that we all kind of have.
Were there any challenges from a writerly perspective in addressing this subject? Like, it's a delicate subject. Was there anything during the process that you found particularly challenging? Anything you had to check yourself on? You're halfway through and like, wait a minute, I've gone off base. Was it difficult for you, or did it just flow organically from the nature of these characters?
I didn't want anything to be cliched. It's so easy. And I think I probably still have cliches in there. I mean, to divorce completely from these ideas we have of cults or ideas we have of churches gone wrong, there's so many familiar images that we already have of that. And so I think in revision, a lot of my work was to just check myself in terms of if these characters were behaving in an expected or cliche way. And that was hard, creating the characters to be really full-bodied, and even the side characters to make them individuals and not just sort of these more cartoonish versions of what we think of when we think of a cult, which is challenging, right? Because I think when you do research cults and you do read their literature, a lot of it does feel really cartoonish and it does feel really expected and cliche. So it is a balance of showing how that is real, but also these are people at the same time. These are real characters.
So we have a good question on audience from Wendy. Did you also have to consider the perspective of the audience as you wrote the novel? How important is the reader audience perspective in your writing process?
Well, at the beginning of writing anything, I try not to think about what anyone else might think. I think that would be sort of inhibiting on what I really want to write. I didn't think a lot about, I don't know, I couldn't let myself go there because, right, then that's too many voices coming in and shifting things. And then maybe you're trying to appease people or you're trying to be sensitive in a way that is unnecessary to certain individuals or groups. It was more in revision where I went back through and thought about, how mainly in terms of faith, I didn't want to write some big statement on faith. That wasn't really my intention. My intention was to show this one individual journey. And so I think, again, that comes back to avoiding cliches, not writing about groups in a way that is not nuanced, not simplifying the truth and not underrepresenting the communities that you're writing about. So I think it is more of a revision thing for me, and I try not to think about audience or else it would be a huge block. Certainly because, you know, if I thought about my family reading this while I wrote it, I might not have written some of the scenes. And in the end, if they are uncomfortable, that's about them and not me. And I think as writers, sometimes we can be hung up on, we don't want to rock the boat, or we don't want to do something. And it's good to be sensitive, it's good to be aware, but you have to ask yourself, what's more important, the truth of my story, or, you know, not offending like Aunt, someone who might see herself in this character. And you can never predict how people will read you. I think that was something I found through this process, is the things that people noticed, or the ways in which they interpreted the story, were wildly surprising to me. So you might expect a certain reader to take something one way and they might not even notice that part. So we just don't know.
I had to convince myself absolutely that my grandmother would never read anything I wrote before it's published. Norma, you're my favorite person right now, because she said that she visited the town that her book was set in and stole a telephone book from the hotel to get the German and Irish names for the people who lived there. So that is being a professional author right there. That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Is that you have a book to follow? What's next in the works?
Yeah, so I think early 2022, I have a short story collection that will come out called COWBOYS and Angels, and that was written alongside writing this book. So anytime I felt really blocked writing this book, I would go write a short story. And by the end, I realized I had come out with 2 books. And I love the stories because in a way, they feel to me very connected to this book, even though a reader might not pick up on that so overtly, but there are some reoccurring characters and there's some fun little connections, I think, throughout. So to me, they feel like maybe they're in the same family. They're in the same world.
I was reading some of your stories this week, and I was like, wait, these seems like you have enough for a story collection. So I'm glad to hear that this is actually a thing that's occurring. Someone pointed out that I skipped Rick's question, and I did, but I meant to mention that, Rick, I skipped your questions. I think we covered it earlier on in the conversation about how the form and the plot of the novel changed over the course of writing. We covered that in a couple ways. So, Rick, I didn't mean to ignore you, but wanted to keep going. Let's see. So, journey as a writer. We have a few minutes left, and I probably won't get to everyone's questions because it seems like a lot of things are coming in right now. So the question specifically here was, once you were sending out the book, did you have any pressure to market it for YA because you have a 14-year-old protagonist, or did genre questions come up at all?
Genre questions never came up. I guess they never came up with my agent. They never came up with any publishers. I don't know why. I think maybe the themes of the book are really grounded in an adult fiction landscape, possibly, even though we're having this younger voice.
Yeah, my brain never went YA even with the narrator. So I guess I would have, that probably was the read that I think most people probably had. So as a writer, when did you start putting words on page? Where did you begin this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was interested in reading and writing at a really young age. I had the impulse to record things on paper. That seemed to just be innate. But then I think in high school, actually, I was not a very good student, but I was reading voraciously all the time. And luckily, a teacher kind of had observed that and asked if I wanted to write book reviews for the school paper. And that actually changed my whole life, because I thought, oh, there's something I can do in this world that I actually want to do. I didn't know that before. So I ended up going to school for journalism, actually, just kind of following that thread. I worked on the paper in high school, and then it seemed to be a way to continue this act of writing. And with the school paper, it was cool because I had an immediate audience. I was able to be published like that next week and see my name in print for the first time as a teenager, and not really know anything like that before. So journalism was the basis of how I kind of started writing. And then in college, I realized that I was really attracted to English classes and creative writing classes. So I kind of started realizing that I wanted to write fiction more. But yeah, writing both, I think journalism was the way in to that.
So what was the process of this book in particular? From you finishing the first draft, did you query agents? Was that the next step? And how did the process go from finishing the book to querying agents to finding a publisher?
I think I had a non-traditional experience in that one day in my spam folder in my email was a form letter that someone had emailed through my website, which at the time was like a WordPress site and had like a weird little email me box. And it was an agent asking if I had anything I was working on that I would like to show them. And so this kind of came out of nowhere. And at the time I was in the earlier phases of writing this book. So I just emailed back, I have a couple chapters I could show you. And in the meantime, had researched and seen that this agent was actually really legit. At first I thought it was like a really sick joke. I even said to my friend, like, there could not be a worse spam for me to get. Like, how mean is this? So it was very surprising. And it came at me before I had felt I was ready to have an agent. But what ended up happening was that it sort of lit that fire. So I started writing a query letter. I figured I better tell her what this novel's about. And I was about to go to the Tin House Writers Workshop where you get this 15-minute time with an agent. So it was weird timing where then I got to talk to someone else, and I emailed a few others just sort of to have that variety, I guess, before making a decision, even though I felt like this agent was maybe a good fit. And yeah, so it happened sort of on its own. And I know that is not helpful really to talk about, but that is how it happened. But it is good to remind yourself that actually having short stories out, being published on findable websites, agents are looking at that stuff. So considering that when you submit for publication, is this publication going to be able to share my work in a way that it might be seen? So things like that. She had seen one of my stories online and then contacted me, and it was a match made in heaven. So we worked together. She was interested in working with me on the book. So it was nice because we did many revisions together.
That an agent seeks you out makes me like you a little less, but nothing personal. That was not my process.
I hate telling the story. It's not really a great story. I should just make up a lie. It was grueling.
It is a great story because I know a couple of people who've had something similar where they were sought out, and I think it's hopeful because there's me telling my story of the years-long slog, and then someone says, sometimes it's not that. That's good to remind people.
There's all varieties, and this is not to say that I hadn't been ruthlessly rejected by like every publication for many years prior to that. So, I'm still rejected to this day. It's just part of it.
So we want to wrap up pretty much right about now. So I'm going to ask one final request, not even a question. Could you please share one piece of craft advice? What's one piece of writing craft that you hold near and dear?
Yeah, I think I'm going to pull this one from what I hear most of my students come to me with. Whenever we have kind of our end of term chat and they are wondering something, it almost always seems rooted in their own self-doubt. How do I get past my own doubt about myself as a writer? Or how do I write? How do I just get through a block? And so for me, I think the most important thing I ever did was go deeper than that and question, where is this doubt in myself coming from? We all bring our own stories to the page. We all come to the work it's impossible to separate who you are from your creative work, I believe, where it's a spiritual act to write in this way. And any blocks you have about your own abilities, your own self-worth, whatever that looks like for you, I think it's worth unblocking those and getting to the root of your true intention and desire in yourself as a writer, and then believing in that. And that isn't something that you can magically just decide on, or maybe you can, but I try to make that conscious decision where I'm not willing to devote any of my energy to self-doubt. I'm not willing to devote any of my energy to criticizing myself or getting down on myself for not writing enough or comparing myself to other writers. And of course I will still do that sometimes, but I think just really setting that intention, because you do not have infinite energy. So where is it going? And just questioning, is it going to your work? Is it going to actually getting the work down on the page, or are you spending a lot of time talking about how you're scared to write? And I don't mean that to sound harsh in any way, but I just see that a lot. I see that you can get in a spiral of not creating and focusing on that not creating. And there's many ways to unblock. I think one book that I know was helpful for me was The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I don't know if anyone's done that. It can be a little bit cheesy, but I feel like it asks some of those difficult questions and can really help you get to the core of what kind of artist you want to be and what that will look like, because that is really what it's about. And that will bleed over into a daily writing practice or a weekly writing practice. It will allow you to get all of that stuff that doesn't matter, because it really doesn't. What matters is your work out of the way so that you can actually create. And maybe, I hope that's not like, I don't know if that feels concrete enough to be a craft advice, but I think it's one of the most freeing and important things we can do as artists, to really love and accept ourselves and our own work, and be a champion for yourself and not really doubt yourself.
Well, this has been my favorite thing of the week by far. So thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't read Godshot yet and you don't have a copy, buy a copy. This is a brilliant book, the beginning of many more brilliant books to come. I'm looking forward to the story collection, even though I've read some of the stories already. So please buy this from your local independent bookstore. We just posted a link as well to bookshop.org if you don't have access to your own local indie. Bookshop.org helps local indies everywhere. Also, we are the Writers Center. Please go to writer.org and click workshops to see our upcoming workshops, and events to see our upcoming events. All our upcoming events and workshops are online, and all the events are free. So please take a look at those. We'd love to see you at things over the next few weeks and months, and who knows how long we'll be in the situation. And finally, if you'd like to donate, our development director, Amy Freeman, would like me to show this sign again. You can donate on our website, but also at Venmo at writers-center.
It's going to our it's actually going to our scholarships.
Yes. Yeah, so all donations, you can specify that you want those to go to our scholarship fund, and our scholarships are for writers who need financial assistance to attend our paid workshops. We have a really great, robust scholarship fund. It's been really helpful to help expand our offerings beyond just those who are paying for them. And finally, I think I'm gonna hold the book again. The book is up again, and I love it. I love it so much. This was so exciting. Oh, there's a cat in front of Amy, sorry. And that's us. Thank you so much for coming. We will be back again in 2 weeks, I believe, for our next event. Have a good evening. Thanks.